Hello everyone. It's been a minute. We have ruminated over the fact that the Boston Celtics have indeed well and truly won the championship. We took this time to process and filter and come to terms with the emotion that Boston have won, but they have. And as you can see, Sardaji is not with us. But then again, we are here and we are back, and it is that day of the year in the NBA calendar where all the 30 teams look across their calendars and wait for it, saying that this is the day, and this is the day where most of these teams always strive to make statements in terms of signing star players, star pieces. It is the NBA free agency, and of course, Aniket, I have you with me. First of all, warm welcome. Hope you're doing great.
Yep.
It's been quite a while since we've taken time off to get our thoughts in order. Harry's still not come to terms with it. That's why he's taken a vacation. So he still can't digest. He still can't digest the fact that Boston are indeed NBA champions. So he's off. He's off to the forests to meditate and do penance.
Exactly. It's a big
Yeah.
curse on the NBA, so we need some players so that there'll be somebody on the Eastern Coast who can actually challenge them next season.
Yeah,
We did not see
precisely.
enough.
Yeah, we did not. So obviously, we've already one day into the free agency at the time of recording right now. So before we talk about all the deals, which we will in due course, we'll give each of the big trades that have happened enough consideration. But then, looking at the trades that have happened, whatever it is, what are your first thoughts on the free agency in that sense? Do you think it is a little bit underwhelming compared to the previous free agencies? Not the previous
Yeah.
free agencies also, but let's cast our mind to the free agency of last year itself, where it was like a domino effect, where if one team made a trade, like within a few hours, it was Boston who came out with Drew Holiday when Milwaukee had signed Damian Lillard, and there's like a huge hoopla of pieces
Hmm.
falling around in different places and all that. But it's
Yeah.
not been the same year. So, what are your first thoughts on this free agency so far?
Yeah, I mean you're right in terms of saying the free agency has been slower compared to the other years, right? What we've been couple of days into free agency now, and then we have had deals. We've had quite a few deals, but the news has broken in very small and short segments. So earlier we had Adrian Wojnarowski and Shams come out, boom, 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 boom. You have like 25, 30 deals within the first 25, 30 minutes of free agency starting. But now those same deals are taking place over a couple of days. So this is probably because of the new CBA which the NBA implemented at the beginning of this free agency season, which has caused many teams to be more mindful of what kind of players they sign and how if they want to extend someone do take another look, or basically check their cap again in terms of what kind of deals they can make, because earlier the NBA the owners had a lot of spending power in the years past. But at this point, with the new CBA, it's restricted, or I would say it's constrictive of the owners. It's trying to basically have some kind of a restriction in place where owners can't overspend every year. So that's the reason you see teams like the Clippers or Warriors, not sign their own star players to longer term contracts and just let them go for nothing, which we'll talk about later in this, in this show. So yeah, it's been slow. I'm guessing it's going to be like this for the next couple of days as well, where we'll see like a few deals, but it won't be anything like anything which goes crazy or something.
I know this is way too early to ask in the context of free agency, because we still have the summer league that is yet to start,
Yeah.
and with the NBA season still quite a few months away. But do you think that there is potential for a franchise altering trade that could happen in the course of this free agency, or do you think that this is not exactly the year where this is going to happen?
I think you can never say never with the NBA, right? We always see surprises thrown up. So there, it could happen either right now, or it could happen, till the up to the trade deadline as well. So I would give it some time. There could be trades. There definitely will be teams that want to compete and will like to get another star player on their team. But the only issue now is you can't stack up a lot of stars on your team. Like previously, we could stack up, or teams could stack up three stars, like we saw with the Clippers, we saw with the Warriors earlier. All that is not possible right now, unfortunately, with the new CBA restrictions and rules. So it's going to be interesting to see how teams play it out. Like there's going to be some teams who are satisfied with two stars and multiple role players, and I guess that's how it's going to be. So we'll see how the market plays out. At this point, I see a lot of superstars getting locked up by their own teams to longer term contracts, which we'll talk about. But you can never say never in the NBA. There could just be something out of left field which we didn't expect.
So it's interesting that you mentioned the CBA because I think just recently there's been an announcement that the NBA has increased the salary cap
Yeah.
by a whopping 5 million. It was 134 point something before. They've now made it to what 140 mil or something like that. Yeah, that is the new
140,
salary.
144 or something like.
140 point or 140.4 or something like that. It's a very marginal increase. So, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, if there's no point of that
Yeah.
increase if it is such a marginal increase, if you ask me, but then of course I'd like to know what are your 2 cents on this salary increase of the cap space that is there.
So I mean, the salary cap basically increases, does not increase a lot, year by year, unless there's a big media deal that the NBA sign or they've suddenly got a lot of revenue in. So I'm not surprised that it increased just by that little. But I mean, the major changes to this CBA is the kinds of rules that are introduced in terms of the first apron, the second apron, and the kind of penalties the NBA will put upon teams in case they break any of these aprons. So teams are very mindful of that. They don't want to hard cap themselves, or even if they hard cap themselves, they don't want to take on very long term contracts that will cripple their franchise. So teams like the Boston Celtics and earlier the Golden State Warriors, who were above the salary cap and above the second apron as well. So they couldn't use any of the exceptions to sign players, and the only way they could sign players is through mid-level, through veteran minimums. So that basically hinders their spending power in free agency. So teams are very mindful of the kind of rules that are in the current CBA. That's why you see like executives like Rob Pelinka come out and say that trades are very difficult in the CBA. I mean, it's not difficult. I would say it's difficult, but it's not impossible. It's either it's become more complicated with the existing structure in place. So I wouldn't say salary cap, is the major hindrance. It's just that the aprons are now much more well defined and a little more. It gives the teams and the executives a little more headache in terms of who they need to sign and what kind of contracts.
Yeah, so a few numbers based on the salary
Yeah.
cap that is there. So the actual salary cap is set up at 140.588 in the million. The luxury tax is set at 170.814. The first apron is
Eight.
178.132, and the second apron is at 188.931. Then, if we come a little bit to the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, that is 12.822, and the
Yeah.
taxpayer mid-level is
5.9.
5.168. Yeah.
Hmm.
So the team's salary floor is at 90% of the cap. That comes close to 126. So these are a little bit of the numbers that have gone through in terms of the salary cap and the aprons that have been there. So now, before we get into the players, there are a few coaching changes that have also happened just about before the start of the free agency. So let's talk
Yeah.
about the two main ones. We've already had a little bit about the podcaster. There's a certain mind the game podcaster has become Lakers' new head coach now. So we've already known about that. We already had our opinions about that. But there are two new coaching changes that have happened. One of them is with Detroit Pistons taking on JB Bickerstaff, and the Cleveland Cavaliers appointing Kenny Atkinson. So what are your opinions on both the coaching appointments, and how do you rate both these coaching appointments on a scale of 1 to 10?
I think you'd be in a better position to answer about JB Bickerstaff, considering you've seen him, or at
All
least
right.
you've seen
Okay.
more Cavs games
But
than me.
in
So
terms of Kenny Atkinson,
yeah, in terms of Kenny Atkinson, I think that he's always been looked very, he's kept in very high regards in terms of high esteem in terms of NBA coaching circles. So he was coaching the Brooklyn Nets earlier. I mean, this was when Kevin Durant and Kyrie were both injured, and I would say he did a pretty good job with the limited, roster availability he had at that time. So obviously he was let go in favor of Steve Nash at that point because of the player preferences, and then he joined, I believe, the Warriors as an assistant coach.
assistant coach, yeah.
Yeah. So In the Golden State Warriors, I think that he was running the offensive system there, and he was probably second in command to Steve Kerr at that time. So I would say he's floated around different kinds of job opportunities. I would say the coaching opportunities in the last few years. I think he was interested in the Lakers gig as well, and a few other teams. And I think that he is probably a solid choice, for a team which is competing for, or at least trying to compete for a championship. I think that he's someone who has experience working with, I would say with players like superstar players, because he previously was there in the Brooklyn Nets when Kevin Durant and Steve Nash were there, and now he's going to a Cavs team, which has Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland and so on and so forth. So it's not. I think it's going to be something very natural for him, the transition, because he's going back to a conference which he's already been in. So I would say that it's a smart hire. So we can never at this in today's NBA we can never call a coaching hire good, because coaches get sacked pretty often compared to the earlier times when coaches used to stay for longer periods. But I would say from the first perspective, it's a pretty smart hire, pretty good choice compare when you see the market of coaches that you have at this point. So yeah, I think the Cavs, if they gel well, if their chemistry is good, Kenny Atkinson is there to take them to probably the next level, which JB Bickerstaff couldn't.
And how do you rate the appointment out on a scale of 1 to 10?
I would say that since it's like the probably the most competitive choice they had in terms of who was available, give it a solid like 8 on 10.
Fair, fair.
Yeah.
So I'm very mixed when it comes to JB Bickerstaff. First of all, I was of the opinion that he should have stayed, perhaps, because I think with the job that he did, I think the reason why he was let go was because, like you said, player preferences again. But this is a coach who stuck by his players through thick and thin. Had the play he had the players' backs from the beginning, and you could see that the Cavs have the last season itself. I mean, he took the job 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But then the last 2 years, especially last year with the crisis after crisis that we had, where we lost in key players, there was a lot of issues, but he still managed to get us out of those, and we played some of the best basketball of the season during that stretch. And obviously there is tangible progress there, where in his second season we made the play-in, we then made the playoffs, and then we made the Eastern Conference semis in the recently concluded season. So there was genuine progress, and there is tangible progress that you can point out to. And one of the biggest strengths that he has is working with the youth. And Detroit there does have a nice young core out there. If you take a look at their roster, and if he does manage to get them close to a 30-win season or a 35-win season, that would be considered to be a pretty good hire from a coaching point of view. I think that would be job well done. Yeah. And I think with the improvement that we've seen in Darius throughout the course of Bickerstaff's tenure, I think he could probably have a similar effect on Cade. I think he needs someone. I think Bickerstaff would be the perfect coach to get the best out of Cade. And then you also have a 3-and-D in the form of Ausar, who we've spoken about so well in as far as a defensive perspective is concerned. And more often than not throughout the course of his coaching tenure, we've seen Bickerstaff be a defense-first coach, where he has set priorities when it comes to defensive stability and defensive solidity with his schemes. So I think that all in all, Detroit does need a little bit of a defensive identity, and I don't think there is a better coach than Bickerstaff. So I'd give it, like you said, it's a solid 8. It comes down to how many games does he win, because we said the same thing about Monty Williams last season, and he wasn't able to deliver that. So again, it comes down to how he makes this side competitive and how many wins he manages to get with this side. So
yeah. So do you think that he is a good coach for a rebuilding team? And also,
absolutely.
Detroit, man, they're just giving out long-term contracts to coaches. I believe that 5 years again for JB Bickerstaff.
Yeah, I think, but lesser money, because they learned the Monty Williams lesson the hard way. So it's a little bit of a lesser money. And again, I think they've had a change in their front office or something like that. I'm not really sure. There has been another shift in their front office where someone reports to someone else. I'm not really sure of the specifics there. But then again, it's an organization with constant change, which
Mm.
sometimes is a huge issue for a new coach in a team that is just trying to rebuild. But
Yeah.
then again, that's one thing that could potentially go against Bickerstaff throughout the course of coaching tenure. But then again, basketball has a very unique way of surprising us in the best possible ways. So I think we hold our judgments up until the season actually begins, or we are at least 15 to 20 games into the NBA season.
Yeah.
And without wasting much time, let's actually get into the cream of the crop. And obviously, the first trade we talk about was, I think this was quite an open secret. Because every time, whenever Paul George has said that I want to stay here and build a legacy for myself, he's ended up bouncing to another team. We seen him do that with Indy, we seen him do
Yeah.
that with OKC, and now we've seen him do it with the Clippers. So I think he has what, a 4 year,
Oh, yeah.
250
212.
212, yeah, a 212 million deal.
Yeah.
So Philadelphia get a player who is elite on his days. So I mean, the floor is yours, Aniket. What do you make of this trade? Like, do you think with the way Philly played last season, do you think that is Paul George actually the right player that they were looking for?
I think that they were. It was he was the best player available, right? I don't think there was any other superstar available in this free agency period this season. So Philly did not have to give up any assets to get him. He was a free agent signing. So and I think there was a mutual respect between Joel Embiid and Paul George over the entire course of the offseason. They did come on a few shows as well, and Joel Embiid was trying to indicate that Paul George, the deal is kind of already done when he talks about players who Philly was looking for at that time. So I would say a good addition to the roster, considering the fact that they also have Tyrese Maxey, they have Joel Embiid, and now Paul George. And if all of them are healthy, they do look good, and they definitely might give Boston a run for their money. So from the Philly side, a very good deal, considering Paul George also wanted to go to Philly, and I would say now they have a roster in place that can challenge the Celtics. And it's about time, right? The Boston Celtics needed some competitors in the East, and I think Philly is probably the closest at this point with Paul George's addition. So they did not have anyone as dynamic as him, I would say, since a while, right? They've had Ben Simmons, but Ben Simmons couldn't shoot. They've had Tobias Harris, but Tobias Harris is like, I guess, neither here nor there. He's just an okay player. But now they replaced Tobias Harris with a Paul George. So definitely an upgrade there. And Paul George could easily slot in as a number two, which is his kind of a natural, I would say the way he plays naturally, right? Even on the Clippers, he was a number two to Kawhi, and now he's going to be a number two to Joel Embiid. And when Embiid doesn't play, Philly has someone who they can rely upon in the regular season. So from that perspective, it's good for them. And again, well done to Daryl Morey. He always plans things pretty well in terms of free agency. So Philly have had a great offseason, to be frank. They've re-signed Kelly Oubre, and I think they also signed Andre Drummond on a 2 year, 10 million deal. So good
Also,
off
also Eric Gordon.
Eric Gordon as well, who's a deadly shooter. So from Philly's perspective, very good. Off season. From the Clippers' perspective, a failed a failed era. I don't know if you want to call it an era because they didn't win shit, but it's
You
a
really
failed.
want to? You really want to call era?
I don't know what to call it. A failed I don't know, get together. I would say, because that's what, like, two LA boys just got together, try to do something and completely failed. So Kawhi and Paul George, the reunion, or not the reunion, the get together. I mean, just failed, right? The intention was for them to compete for a chip, but in the last 5 years, they've just gone to one conference final, suffered like a plethora of injuries, have had many roster tweaks, but just never found it, plausible to get to that NBA final and win it. So a failed kind of a 5 year tenure there. And ultimately, they lost him for nothing, which is even more worse. They traded away the entire farm, their entire future.
Yeah, exactly.
And they traded away Shea Gilgeous Alexander, who's probably like the best guard in the Western Conference right now.
Yeah,
So
could say that. Could say
yeah.
that.
So from Clippers' perspective, a big L for them. We'll see. I mean, they didn't want to give Paul George that fourth year on that contract, and that's the main reason why PG wanted to leave, because he felt that this could probably be his last big contract. He's, I think, 34 or something, or 33
Yeah,
now. So
34.
yeah, so obviously the Clippers, considering that the new CBA is also implemented, did not want to give him that extra 4 years, the extra year on that contract, so they just let him walk. And now Clippers do not have anyone to replace him, although they did re-sign James Harden. I mean, we'll talk about that, but yeah, not the best 5 years for them.
So I have the financials here. I'm just trying to get it. Like he's going to
Hmm.
earn this much in a space of the contract that he signed, but I'm just
Yeah.
not getting it. It's like 40, yeah, 49.2 in the 24-25 season, 51.7 in the 25-26 season, 54.1 in the 26-27 season, and 56.6 in the 27-28 season. Shades of that John Wall contract with the Washington Wizards in his 30s out there. That's the proper shades out there. So my 2 cents on the Paul George trade is very simple. When fit and healthy, he's one of the best two-way players in the league. He's elite on offense. He's elite on defense. He's time and again showed that. This year with the Clippers, he arguably had his best year with the Clippers in terms of the numbers that he had uh,
Yeah.
on both sides of the court. And it is worth noting that Harden and Kawhi were not able to play their best throughout the course of the season due to injuries. Kawhi didn't suit up for the playoffs, and then so on and so forth. And I think, if all things said and done, the banter aside, I think it was a wise move by the Clippers to not give him that fourth year, because I personally believe that the reliability obviously comes into play here, because
Yeah.
we've seen him miss so many games throughout the course of these 5 years, and as an organization there are certain steps that you have to take to avoid yours to protect yourself from that unreliability of a player's health. Obviously that is not in your control, but giving out the money, and if you're ignoring that, then I think that is a step too far. So I personally believe that
Yeah.
it's a win-win on both sides. Although I don't know what the Clippers will do next, I think Philly have a good launch pad to be that third team that could be a genuine threat in the East. So I think, all things said and done, I think this could be the fresh start that what Paul George needs. I think
Yeah.
Eastern Conference being a much more friendlier conference in
I was
terms
just
of
gonna
the
say that.
yeah a much more friendlier conference in terms of the talent pool that is there of players in the other franchises out there. I think
Yeah.
he would just find that to his liking as well. So
Yeah.
all in all, I would probably rate this an A for the Sixers, and a C for the Clippers, because, like you said, they got nothing in return. He walked away for free, and also, despite that cap space reducing because of Paul George scenario, I don't see anyone that they can fill worth filling
They
out there.
Since they're over the cap, they can't just replace his contract.
Yeah, precise. That's
That's
the
the
yeah
unfortunate part for them. So
yeah. But they did. So let's talk about, since we're on the Clippers, we'll
yeah.
talk about the others that they committed with Harden. Harden apparently took a pay cut to stay. So, what are your thoughts on that, with Harden staying there? And for someone who's constantly been labeled someone who's self-centered, who's toxic, who's argumentative, this is not exactly the thing that suits into the narrative that he's selfish or self-centered in that particular aspect. Because for the first time in his basketball career, the man has taken a pay cut. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there was probably very few suitors for him with the kind of contract he wanted. So obviously the Clippers wanted to keep him, and he wants to be in LA. So I think that was a natural fit for them. And speaking of pay cut, I think he did take one when he was in Philly to accommodate PJ Tucker. So I think that was a very minimal pay cut though. But this time he did take a bigger pay cut. So I think obviously after losing Paul George, the Clippers did not want to lose James Harden as well. So they did come to terms with him on this 2 year 70 million contract. So it's good for the Clippers. It's good for Harden. It's good for the Clippers because they don't need to sign him to a very long-term contract. So 2 years is a reasonable deal for them, and for Harden as well, 2 years is 2 years 70 million is not a bad deal considering he did not have a very good season. Last year, I think he averaged his fewest points since his OKC's 100 days, and he's kind of declining as well in terms of his ball handling capabilities, his shooting as well. Obviously, he's got the foul baiting and stuff, which will not never stop. But in terms of the other talent, he's on the decline at this point. But still a good deal for both sides, I would say. So I would give it like an A minus from my side.
So a question out there with Cans Mars asking what's up with Markkanen. So long story
Hmm.
short, his future quite is still up in the air in the sense that there are quite a few suitors who want him. He had a good
Yeah.
year with Utah. So I think last I read is that the San Antonio Spurs and the Warriors are the two main suitors for his services at this point. And I think Utah is also at a stage where they would like to listen to offers for
Yeah.
him. So I
So
think whoever gets him gets a
hmm,
pretty good shooter, and he's been pretty hot from the 3 point arc so
yes.
far. I think ever since his Cleveland days, I still feel somewhere down the line we could have done much better with
Yeah.
him in the roster. But then again, it's no use crying over spilt milk now that we've already parted ways. I do have a soft spot for him. I do wish him well
Yeah.
wherever he goes. I do enjoy watching him play. He's that player who you cannot hate, especially if you from my point of view, he's that kind of player you cannot hate. He does
Yeah.
his job. He's not into anything. He's not into foul baiting. He's not into those petty fights like the Draymonds would do. So not exactly. I do enjoy. So I hope wherever he goes, it's good. I'm pretty surprised that the Lakers are not in for him, or are they?
I don't know. There's nothing coming out from the Lakers at this point, so I really don't know what they're up to. Probably Rob Pelinka is at Disneyland, having a candy or something. So I have no idea what they're up to.
He's having an
But
oversized turkey leg.
so, but I did hear about Markkanen as well. I did hear too that Utah and Golden State were interested, and sorry, not Utah. I mean San Antonio Spurs and Golden State. And I do believe that Utah might trade him if they get the right pieces back,
The right hall.
because
Yeah.
I think earlier in the free agency period, some experts or some reporters believed that they wanted Paul George, but then once they could not land Paul George or any other superstar, they might pivot to rebuilding mode again. So just look out for Markkanen and some of the other players like Clarkson and Colin Sexton as well, in terms of if they're going to trade all these guys, or just it's time to watch this space because it's an important decision for them, since they are in a position where they're neither here neither there. So
Yeah.
with their current roster, they might be about the 11th or 12th in the Western Conference. So it does not make sense for them to keep all of them around and not trade them when they're at their highest value.
Correct.
So just look out for that space. And if you're watching us this far, do subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and
And do share
share
the
it with your
video as
friends.
well. Yeah, do
Yes.
share the video as well. It's very interesting now since we spoke about Golden State. Let us talk about the Golden States. Let us talk a little bit about the two outgoings that I mean. So let us talk about the first one, Clay 0 out of 10 Thompson, and obviously being a Cavs fan, can Steph still win the championship? Long story. If you want a short answer, no. Want a long answer, hell no. So I don't think it's very unlikely that this Warriors side can go ahead and win a championship, even with the right pieces. The front office has been such a mess. They've had a host of bad decisions over the years. Ever since Durant bounced, they've made a host of bad decisions and they've still not been able to come to terms with it. The
I think
fact
that
that they
the
won a
one the
bad they won a championship was
yeah.
despite the bad decisions and not because of it. So it was despite the shit that was going on behind the scenes, they still managed to win a chip. So
So
I
if I had
don't
to
think, yeah,
if I had to answer this question, I would say that they'll always be there or thereabouts with a shot. But it's just that the Western Conference has become so bloody good.
so
So
stacked.
yeah, so stacked. Like I don't know why people should just go east, because there's nobody in the east. So everyone is coming to the west. So it's very difficult for teams like the Warriors or the Lakers or even the Clippers in terms of how they can compete for a championship without making the right moves. Because you got teams like OKC who are extremely stacked right now. You got Denver, you got Minnesota, you got Memphis. I don't
Not
know.
to
You
forget
got so many
Memphis with Ja coming back.
with Ja coming back. You have other teams like San Antonio who got Wemby as well. Who will always improve. So it's very difficult in this NBA landscape to win a title without making the right moves.
You have to go
So
young. I think the
have to go
secret
young
here is
as
you
well.
have to go young and you have to go talented. You have to go young and you have to go deep. You cannot have a superficial first five and not the
Yes,
right bench pieces to go long or to make even a run to the finals. I think you need a deep roster and you need a Steph. Is Steph done?
I don't think he's done. He's still like
No,
at the top of
he
his
needs
game.
help though. He
He
needs
just
help.
needs help. And when you have only Draymond Green as your help at this point, it's not enough.
A ticking time bomb.
But yeah, we should continue about the Warriors. Yeah, you were
Yeah,
going on with
so
play.
let's talk about Clay Thompson. So Clay Thompson, Dallas, the sign and trade is completed, and it's a very interesting point of view from the Clay situation because Clay had another offer on the table. Not even Clay in the organization, the Warriors had another offer on the table. That offer came from the Lakers. It was 20 million a year, along with D'Angelo Russell going the other way. But for some reason, the Warriors have rejected that and have indeed instead elected to go for a trade that gives them only 2 second round picks. So is that a huge blunder on the part of the Warriors? We will talk about how it affects Clay in a little while, but I would like to know, do you think the Warriors fumbled there?
I don't know. I don't know if fumbled is the right word because I'm not sure like what the intentions are in terms of whether they wanted a player back or they just wanted picks back, or because the Lakers were giving them, or as reported, giving them D'Angelo Russell. So we don't know if the Warriors actually wanted the contract or they wanted any contract back. So from the Dallas Mavericks, they did not get any contract back and just picks. So we know that the Warriors want to reduce their spending and want to keep their flexibility open for the now and also for the future. So in terms of that, I don't know why. I mean, I'm not sure exactly if this is their mindset, but I think the Lakers offer was pretty good. Maybe they just didn't want to trade the Lakers, considering they are one of their biggest rivals in the same conference, in the same division as well. So maybe that could also be the case. And yeah, I'm not sure because D'Lo was an expiring contract. They could have traded him elsewhere again, or just waited for till the trade deadline and done something with that. But clearly, it does seem like something is up some in terms of what they wanted to do. So we'll see in terms of how this reflects on their future decisions in this
A
free
much more
agency.
serious question: do you believe that this Warriors front office is not the same as it used to be? Do you think that this Warriors front office is now teetering on the verge of mediocrity? Because I think this is not the only decision that shows their lack of depth, that they are
Hmm.
clearly not come to terms with the competitive nature of the league. They've made some really horrible decisions throughout the course of the 5 years. They have, from a personnel point of view, from a tactical point of view, from as far as the game is concerned, from so trading out Jordan Poole, getting in Chris Paul, only
Yeah.
to waive Chris Paul again, which we will talk about later. Then giving Clay another 2 years, I guess, and then now letting him go, not giving him the right move. Also blocking Andrew Wiggins to play the Olympics.
Yeah.
There's clearly a conflict of
It's,
interest there
hmm.
as well because Steve Kerr is US coach, and
I think
that could
it's more of they didn't want him to play for the Olympics because he's been very injury prone recently, and they probably want to use him for a trade. So they're fearful that if he goes to the Olympics and gets injured, they can't use him on a trade. I am getting a sense that that could be the reason why they kind of vetoed his participation for Canada. But in terms of your bigger question, there definitely has been a difference in their management since Bob Myers stepped down a season, or I think 2 seasons back. So the whole Draymond extension also was pretty ludicrous. I think 4 years, 100 million is a lot for someone who you know for his antics. It's a lot for someone in terms of his availability as well as what he gives on the court. I understand his defense and his playmaking skills are why he's being touted as, or why he's the mainstay of that Warriors roster. But apart from that, his off-court antics, causes a lot of issues in that locker room, as we saw with Jordan Poole, and I'm sure it's caused a lot of issues with other personnel as well. So definitely, there's been shift in terms of the management. I would say that during the early tens, or even in the later part of that decade, they were at their peak, right, when they could get Kevin Durant, and when they had their amazing finals, consecutive runs and all that, when they played the Cleveland Cavaliers time after time and won championships. Definitely something has changed. And yeah, it does seem that the other teams are rising while the Warriors are at this point, teetering on their last legs, or just
Things you
relying on
things you love to
wherever
say.
Steph. Yeah, exactly, wherever Steph takes them. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So let's come to Clay. So Clay's obviously got a new home now
yeah.
with arguably one of the best point guards in the league in Luca, and and arguably one of the best supporting. Like, there is a great core out there. You have Kyrie, who's just come out of one of his most productive seasons in recent memory. You have Luca, will always be Luca, and you have a pretty capable supporting cast out there with the likes of Daniel Gafford, with the likes of Derek Lively. Then you have Josh Rich, no, PJ Washington, sorry,
PJ Washington.
PJ Washington. So that's a pretty well-rounded roster there, along with a pretty effective bench also. So you have a lot of good options out there. Where does Clay fit in, and how does Clay fit in there?
So Clay takes up that Tim Hardaway Jr. spot, which was kind of vacant because Tim Hardaway Jr. had a terrible season last year. So he fixes that. No, I won't say fixes, but he takes up that spot as a movement shooter on that offense. So I think he comes in the starting lineup to play alongside Luca and Kyrie. And now the Mavs have a lot of roster options on their on their team. They have quite a lot of depth. They have good players, solid players on that team, and Clay is just another addition to that. So now we'll see how motivated Clay is, in a new franchise for the first time in his career. I wouldn't have, thought these words would come out of our mouths when Clay would be leaving the Warriors to join another franchise, but that day has come upon us. So it's going to be interesting to see, firstly, in terms of his mindset and his mentality as to how he takes into the fact that he's not going to play in a Warriors jersey again, and he's not going to be at Chase Center most of the time in a season. So we have to observe that first, and then obviously he did not have a great a very good end to the season, the 0 for 10 thing, and a few other shooting performances. He was benched for a long period of time in that second half of the season. So has he totally bounced back from that? We'll see. How the initial 5 to 10 games pans out for the Mavericks. But Luca, you surround him with shooters, and then he gives you the ball. So that's what he's good for, in terms of he's able to spot everyone on the floor. And now you've got another great shooter. I would say one of the top 5 shooters ever to play with Luca. So definitely, it'll be good for Luca. It'll be good for the entire Mavs team to have someone like that on the roster. So I think he would fit in seamlessly. It just I don't know how Jason Kidd would probably employ him in his offense, because he's a movement shooter, and there weren't many movement players on the Mavericks last season. So we'll see how it goes.
Do you see him walk into the starting five, or do you see him like a capable uh, 3 and D from the bench? Because obviously his age needs to be taken into
Yeah,
consideration. Obviously his underlying health status will also be looked at, because let's be honest, he's come on the back of two major injuries that could render any professional player useless. Not to forget, getting those injuries in the wrong side of 30 also.
yeah.
So, with all these factors considered, do you think that he's still going to be a good starting option for Jason Kidd? Should he choose to use him there, or do you think that he would be that spark plug from the bench? Who could be the difference in a close game? Say if Dallas are trailing by five, a good 5 to 6 minutes burst from Clay, which gives you what, 10 to 12 points,
Yeah.
That could be the difference between a close win and a close loss. So, do you think that is what the role Clay would play, or do you think that he still has the quality to be a starting option on a team that is genuinely going to be classified as a contender in the coming season?
Yeah, I think Jason Kidd will probably give him the opportunity to compete for that starting lineup. They'll probably decide their lineup based on how everyone does in their training camp, which will be held before the start of the season. So he'll have all the opportunities to prove himself that he is the capable starter. And in case he does that, I think he's going to be put into the starting lineup. But now that you've talked about the bench thing, I think he does have experience playing from the bench and being very impactful for the from the bench for the Warriors in some of the games in the second half of the last season. So I would say he's suited for both positions now. It's just about how he comfortable he is, being a bench player compared to his starting role, also which he's been doing for since he's come into the NBA. So I think Jason Kidd will have to decide that based on how things go at training camp, and they have different roster combinations and different players, trying different things out in the offense and defense. Obviously, he's lost a step on defense, so we should take that into account as well, considering his age, as you said. So teams might try to exploit that if he starts. But in terms of the other things, I think he's still a very capable shooter. I think the 0 for 10 or the few other performances last season should be, I would say, overlooked in terms of him starting afresh in a new situation at this point. So he's going to get the opportunity. It's just about whether he's up for it in terms of his starting capability now.
So the next trade that we'll talk about is Grandpa Chris Paul, 39 years old. He's been waived from the Warriors to save salary and has now been picked up by the San Antonio Spurs. Now, obviously,
Yeah.
throughout the course of last season, we've known that Wemby needs someone to facilitate for him because Wemby cannot do everything by himself. And and despite him doing everything by himself, it was still a fantastic season for him, but not so much for the team in general. And how do you think that Chris Paul's addition under Coach Pop, who I don't know how long is he going to stay as head coach here? We've been saying this for the past 4 years that Pop is going to be coaching his last season, but he's still there, and he's still. I don't think. I think he has that old
Yeah.
Vince Carter saying in his locker somewhere. I have another one left in me. So so I don't know, but do you think that Chris Paul under Coach Pop facilitating for Wemby, do you think that this is probably what San Antonio need at this juncture of their rebuild?
So firstly, he's got like a 1 year, 11 million or something deal.
Yeah, 11 million.
So
1 year, 11 million. Yeah.
that's probably more than what everyone predicted. I think everyone thought he would probably get around 5 million. So firstly, 11 million is something an overpay for him, but I would say he's there just for the mentorship. He's probably going to play like 10 to 15 minutes a night because at this age and at this stage of his career, I don't think he can contribute anything effectively more than that. Obviously, last season was an aberration in terms of his ball usage was at its least ever, and he was playing alongside ball dominant players in terms of Steph and also Clay, who needed the ball a lot for his shooting, and Draymond as well, who's also a playmaker on that team. So he was playing from the bench last season. So I would say that could probably be his role again on the Spurs. But in terms of mentorship, yeah, definitely they needed someone who has Chris Paul's worldly wisdom on that team. They did not have something like that last season, apart from the coaching ranks. But now they've got someone who's you know done it at the highest stage in the NBA and on the international scene as well. So definitely a massive upgrade on for them in terms of their point guard department, as well as someone who can impart wisdom to the other players on the roster, specifically Wemby. So I think we're going to see a lot of Chris Paul to Wemby lobs in the minutes they are on the floor together. That's going to be fun. But yeah, Wemby will learn a lot from Chris Paul as well. Will learn a lot of different skills, different wisdom he might get from the veteran. So it's going to be interesting to see how it works. Because I never thought Chris Paul would be someone who would be a Greg Popovich player, but here we are.
All right, so we'll talk about one last major free agency move before we just rate the rest of them on a short-term scale.
Yep.
So the next move, I mean, it's not exactly a move, but then it's another extension. And I'm not going to ask for acknowledgement. Don't worry, but I will say I told you so. And it is that I told you so. Is that Donovan Mitchell has extended with the Cavs, and I think it's a 3-year 202, or is it a 4-year 202? I'm not really sure.
I think it's
Just
3 years, 150 or something.
Yeah, 3 years 152, I guess.
Yeah, so around that much.
Yeah, so that's a positive for me, if you ask me. I always knew that, you know, he was going to extend, because like I've time and again said that the market is too thin for him. If he would have decided to jump ship, it would only be to one of the New York franchises, and I think Brooklyn are not at that stage where they can afford him, and New York are way too well balanced to have another
Yeah,
player
I
of
agree.
Donovan's caliber out there. So both those options go out of the window. And like I said, I genuinely did not see him go anywhere else bar those two places. And sure enough, my prediction did come through true. In the 3 years, in the 2 years, I'm sorry, he's been 2 years here. In the 2 years that he's been with the side, we've made the playoffs in first round, and then this year we were in the semifinals. Although I would still stand with my prediction that had the Cavs been fully healthy, we would have easily taken that series to 7, is what I believe. I still stand by that. But I think with this, I think the fact that we've managed to keep our core intact for another 2 years, that gives us another window to contend. I think another window to make perhaps one or two. I still think we need someone like a Cam Johnson or a DeAndre Hunter to, just solidify the team. Jalen Smith has already gone, so that's one option off the table that we were looking at from that perspective. So I think there are still a couple of options that are there we could explore. And given that we are under the luxury tax and under the cap line as well, I think it would be a good option to, just visit another arrangement. But then again, for now, I'm really, really happy with the extension.
Yeah, I also agree. I think it was a good deal for both the sides. So as you said, if Donovan were to leave, there were very few options for him. Probably the New York teams and probably Los Angeles as well. So from that perspective, it's a good deal for both sides in terms of the Cleveland could offer him the most money, as well as he gets to stay at a place where he's comfortable in, and also he's going to work with a new coach. So there could be opportunities for changes there in terms of how things work out. Maybe the Cavs do better next season as well. So from that perspective, it's a good deal for both sides. Also, it's going to be interesting to see that now that Donovan Mitchell is signed and Darius Garland is still there.
That's
So
that's one thing that I want to look forward to.
yeah, how they again play together, because you know how this goes down, right? They do well in the regular season, but in the playoffs they get exploited. So do they make a Darius Garland trade later on in the season when things do not go
It
well, or when
looks
they want
very
to make a
likely.
change?
It looks very likely because there were obviously talks earlier on that Clutch were very vocal in the fact that
Yeah,
if Mitchell does resign, then they will look for options in the
for
market.
Garland.
Yeah, and given the fact that he's already on a max,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that there are. Oh, I can only think about one potential landing spot, and that is Nola. But then again, they are too content with the fact that they have Ingram and Zion. So I'm not sure whether Ingram's on the chopping block just yet.
Exactly. I was just want to say, if Ingram is on the block, maybe Cleveland and Nola could do something around
Yeah,
Ingram
some
and
could do something. Yeah, but then
Darius Garland.
I've not seen enough indications of that from a
Yeah.
New Orleans perspective, whether they are willing to put him on the block or whether they're just reluctant to do so. So I think we'd watch the Darius Garland space just
Hmm.
a little, just maybe for a month or two. If there's nothing in that, then I think there's a pretty good chance of him starting the season in a Cavs uniform. Whether he finishes it in a Cavs
Yeah.
uniform is a different question altogether. But if there is no talks regarding him in the next month or two, then I think it's pretty safe to assume that he would start with a Cavs shirt come the start of this season. So uh, I'll pick up a few
Yeah.
trades that have happened. Just rate them from a scale of 1 to 10. One of them is KCP, who goes to Orlando Magic for 3 years, and
I would give it a Yeah.
After a good run and a very brutal and physical series with the Cavs
Yeah.
in the first round, I think they've gone for veteran leadership for that young core, and I think that's a pretty smart move.
I
And he
agree.
also brings championship know-how because the dude has won 2 rings also. So he's a good.
Solid deal. 9 on 10, I would say, for both sides. KCP gets a huge pay upgrade. I would say pay raise
Yeah.
because he was not getting that kind of money in Denver, and he also goes to the Eastern Conference. So a big plus for me because I don't want to see KCP again lock some of the guards on my team. So from that perspective, it's good. And Dallas has Jalen Suggs and KCP, so that's going to be very good. That's going to be very good defensive backcourt for them. So good choice. I would say a smart deal for the Orlando and good, good on KCP. He gets the money he deserves.
Tobias goes back to Detroit for 2 years, 52.
Like 3 on 10 because I don't know why Tobias is getting paid so much and what is Detroit doing by paying him so much. They already have had the Tobias experience before.
So Hartenstein goes to Oklahoma City on 3 years, 87.
So I would say Hardenstein deserves a lot of money, but 3 of the 87, I did not see that coming. That's a huge deal for him.
He's got the
And
bag. To his
he's
credit, he's
definitely
got the
got the
bag.
bag. That's what, like 25 million a season or something around that lines, or a little more than that. That's huge for someone who he's had a good season in New York, but he doesn't know shoot the three, or I wouldn't say he's the most physical center, but I think OKC is has someone who can now protect uh, Chet Holmgren in terms of he can play the five as well because Chet was playing a lot of five last season. So maybe Isaiah Hardenstein has more of the minutes at the five as well. So good deal for them. Maybe a 6.5 on 10.
Maxi has re-signed reportedly for 5 years, 204.
Yes, I mean 10 on 10. He's a very good player, very good point guard. He's there going to be their future for years to come. So yeah,
Mo Bamba of the song. he's 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 going to the Clippers from the Sixers on a 1 year deal.
1 year vet minimum. I don't know, like whatever, 5 on 10. He's
Vet
not proven
minimum.
enough.
Mo is a vet minimum.
Yeah, he's a
Wasn't he?
vet minimum player.
He was a rookie on the DeAndre Ayton draft class. How is he
Yes,
vet?
because they call it a vet minimum, but it's just that it's a minimum signing. So basically, it's
Okay.
like a $2.5 million for a year.
Alright, alright.
Yeah.
So I Clippers reportedly bringing back Nick Batum for 2 years,
Yes.
9.6.
Smart deal. Nick Batum was always, very good in LAC. I don't know why they're calling LAC, but yeah, on the Clippers. So like a good probably 8 on 10. Yeah, good choice for them.
Derek Jones, 3 years, LA Clippers, 30.
Solid 9 on 10, I would say. Derek Jones has had a very good season with the Mavs.
Yeah.
Obviously, the shooting is something which may or may not translate to the Clippers because he shot very well on the Mavs as well. But solid player, solid wing defender. Not the natural replacement to Paul George, obviously, but they still have someone on the wing alongside Kawhi in the starting lineup who they can, who can easily guard opposition players' wings. So yeah.
And the last one, which will be, is Kevin Love, short term deal again to the Heat.
Yeah, I mean, solid. I guess like he was very comfortable in Miami. He knows the structure there. I think, Spo uses him very well. Maybe like a 7.5 on 10. What do you
Two
think?
years, 8 million. I think he should have been out of the league by now. No offense to him. I mean, of course, he's been a great servant for us.
Yeah,
But I think I don't see much of a role for him because he's already on the wrong side of 35 also. I'm not sure if you're giving him what 7 to 8 minutes a game, then I don't think
yeah.
that is
Maybe
enough.
10 minutes. I think this is just the Miami Heat rewarding him with because he signed with them when he was waived by the Cavs last season. So maybe
That
just
was
they
a
just want to reward
mutual
him.
that was a mutual buyout. That not we
Yeah,
weren't waive we did not waive him. It was
sorry, not
it's a mutual
buyout, but
buyout.
he had other suitors as well, but he chose the Miami Heat. So I would say the Heat just wanted to repay him with kind of a short term contract. So maybe that perspective, but I would say he's still okay. He can still contribute. He was good in some parts of the postseason as well last time out. So let's see how it works out. They have someone now to back up Bam Adebayo for like probably 10 to 12 minutes a night. So we'll see how it goes.
Alright, so I think that is pretty much it. There are another few deals happen, but then again,
Yeah.
they're not enough to gather
We
our
have-
attention at least.
Exactly. We have Celtics news, but we never bring them up. So yeah, we don't talk
Yeah,
about the
of
Boston
course.
Celtics.
I mean, and at this point, of course, it's a dead giveaway that and the entire roster is going to resign because they they're going to run with that roster for another year. So I think
Easily.
there's not much to talk about it. So with that being said, I think we've come to an end of the stream. It's great talking about free agency. I mean, it's always been a spectacle. Always catches our fancy. Always gives us enough conversations to talk about throughout the course of the next week or two for even though these are moves that will happen only in the space of the first few days, but then again it gives us enough to keep us occupied for the next 2 to 3 weeks. And even though this year's free agency started on a rather underwhelming note, I'm pretty sure that as time passes we will have much more to talk about and much more to discuss upon. So watch this space. Do like Aniket said, do share, do subscribe, do press the bell icon so that you're notified for any video that comes on this channel. Also, drop us a follow on Insta, show us some love there as well. We will be posting on it's a busy period in terms of all the sport. There is the Euros going on, there will be the Olympics that will be going on, then there of course Olympic means Olympic basketball as well, so we will be
Yeah.
we will be there. We will be
We'll be
there no
able to
matter
cover
what. Yes.
A lot of different teams. We want to definitely want to see the dream team restacked. I mean, they're restacked right now, so I don't know what they're called right now. Maybe the dream or the redeem. Or
They're the
whatever they're
redeem.
called right now.
They are the redeem team.
So we're gonna watching them as well closely and how they perform. But yeah,
It's like the uncle version of the Avengers. All your 35 plus uncles coming in there. They're like the Uncle Drews of the of international basketball.
they're just going back to get their trophy which they lost last time
Yeah.
around. So yeah.
Like the Rucker Classic. the Olympics is their version of the Rucker Classic. Alright, with that being said, this is Delvin along with Aniket wishing all of you a good night. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you all soon on the other side with another episode. Till then, toodles and goodbye.